Welcome to CMO Confidential, the podcast that takes you inside the drama, decisions, and choices that go with being the head of marketing. Hosted by five-time CMO Mike Linton.
Welcome, marketers, advertisers, and those who love them, to Chief Marketing Officer Confidential. CMO Confidential is a program that takes you inside the decisions, drama, and politics that go with one of the most scrutinized jobs in the executive suite, whoever is running marketing. I'm Mike Linton, the former Chief Marketing Officer of Best Buy, eBay, Farmers Insurance, and Ancestry.com, here with my guest, Jeff Severts. Jeff was the Chief Marketing Officer of Ulta, Best Buy Europe, and FTD, as well as the General Manager of Geek Squad. He is the co-founder of RISC, the center at the University of Chicago, with his partner, Steve Levitt of Freakonomics fame. Jeff has also authored the Deadly Memos books, and full disclosure, Jeff and I worked together at Best Buy and have stayed in contact to talk about marketing stuff for the last 15 years. Welcome, Jeff.
It's great to be here, Mike. Again, thank you very much. And you look so official in the studio now. I'm impressed.
Thank you. I feel super extra important here that I'm at the AdCom studios in Cleveland. So today's topic is Jeff wrote an article about the CMO species moving towards extinction. And we're going to talk about that extinction because the CMO job is obviously the fastest churning job in the executive suite. And Jeff, you wrote an article about this saying, gosh, I believe you called CMOs something like houseflies, and you said no one will miss them. And your thesis was that, gosh, you used General Motors as an example, but there's so many burdens on the CMO that they're doomed. And as a five-time former CMO, I found this whole thing very troubling, especially since we know each other. And so tell us, what were you thinking when you wrote this article?
Well, you're right. I did refer to CMOs as the houseflies of the C-suite, and I did so because CMOs are always buzzing around incessantly, irritating people, and then they suddenly drop dead. Not literally dead, but metaphorically dead. I think you might have said in the lead-in that they are the fastest turning role in the C-suite, and I think it's a little more than 2 years. It depends on who you ask, but it's an obscenely short amount of time. So either every CMO who's being hired is an idiot, or there's something structural that's wrong with the role and the way it's being set up.
So I hope
that's the thing.
We're both CMOs. The idiot theory isn't holding a lot of water.
Yeah, if we're only looking at this sample of two, we'd probably support the idiot hypothesis pretty well. But I think to me, it comes down to a couple of things. One is unrealistic expectations, and then how the role has changed. So I had that little story about Mary Barra and GM in the piece. It was fictional. I don't know Mary. I've never worked at General Motors. I was just having fun.
Tell us about it. Tell us about it.
Yeah.
So great example.
What created the idea for the story in my head was her announcement that she had just placed a new CMO at General Motors. And I tried to imagine what was going on in Mary Barra's mind, not what she put in the official announcement, which was, the CMO is gonna do these wonderful things, but what she was actually thinking in her mind. And so, the little tale I spun was her thinking about 400 months of consecutive sales failures at Cadillac. But man, if we just had a little snappy advertising, maybe we could turn this around. Maybe we had some advertising like those guys at Lexus do. They put a big bow on the car and they tell you should give it to your spouse for Christmas. Something really snappy like that would really turn this thing around, which of course is absurd, right? Cadillac has had 400 months of sales declines because of past sins, the cars they've built and the reputation they've built over time. They actually build great cars now, but they have that hangover with their brand equity that has to be resolved. And it can only be resolved through building good cars for a long enough time that you rebuild that trust. So it's a setup, the setup that so many CMOs walk into, especially when they're recruited into the job from the outside, is as the savior on the white horse who's somehow going to turn this thing around when typically what's ailing the company is deeply structural. They have a deep problem with their proposition. They're uncompetitive in the market. But the CMO position, Mike, you know this because you've probably been asked to take many of these jobs, and you probably turn most of them down. The CMO is the one Hail Mary position on the C-suite, right? It's the one where you think, man, maybe this person could turn it around if they came up with the next Wendy's, where's the beef campaign or something. Yeah.
But
they could really.
And this is such an important point, I think, which is the belief that you can fix the problem by talking about it differently.
Yeah.
But if you're a CMO and you're interviewing for, like, how do you even think about this, Jeff? Like, because you're going to be recruited in, and people are going to say, "Gosh, we love our brand. Our brand has been around for 400, however many months you talked about it, and it's got a lot of heritage. All we need to do is wrap it differently, and people will buy it."
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how you see that coming in, and then how you think about it when you get there. And then you also mentioned other factors affecting the CMO. So let's talk about that and then move to those other two topics.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I think it's especially hard because when you're being recruited, it's incredibly flattering.
Yeah.
The company would want you to come in and solve this problem. They have the confidence that you can figure out something that other people haven't been able to figure out before. And I'm as a human being susceptible to that. I think we all are, and we all want to believe that we can do it. And indeed, we can always find some rare case where somebody did do it. But I think, in this world especially, it's not that hard to get the straight scoop on where a brand is and how strong its proposition is in the market. You only got to spend a couple hours in the internet and with a relatively clear eye, and you can figure out where a brand stands, and you can be, if you're honest with yourself, a pretty good assessor of what the risks are coming into the job.
I think it's also key to look at the financials, the real financials of the company, because a lot of times, if the company is not actually looking at why the financials are like they are, they will think the marketing will fix the financials. And a lot of times, the sales loss is being driven by the fact that the product has been surpassed in the market by competition.
Yeah, and organizations have this amazing ability to delude themselves, right? So to have annual strategy session after strategy session, talking about the tactics and making sure the 5-year plan on the spreadsheet ties out, and fiddling with the assumptions until you get it to do so, but not actually directly confronting the strategic issue at hand. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that, and I'm sure you've seen it at least as many times, where, and that's, at least when you're coming in as an outsider, you've got a chance to see that if you let yourself, versus the people who've been immersed in that kind of mass delusion for many years about what's going on with this business. They have much less of a chance, I think, of seeing it.
Look, I think it's super important when you come in, even if you're recruited in one of these jobs, it's to challenge the belief immediately if you think the belief is wrong.
Yeah.
So if I'm coming in and I think the company is not seeing the real problem, if I am putting everything on as a marketer, I'm going to fix this, versus we have a fundamental consumer problem, which I think is one of your other points. If you don't put that up in the beginning, you're letting the belief exist, and you're also putting all the pressure on you to overcome what is marketplace data. You talked about expectations, and I think you also in the article talked about a couple other things. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, I think, Mike, we've seen a lot of change. I mean, I talk about what it was like in the Mad Men era, and I think I came in just at the very tail end of the Mad Men era. Maybe you were there, right, with Don Draper drinking martinis.
You're killing me. I liked you on the show the first time, not so much this time.
Well, maybe you were, maybe you were an apprentice or something at the time, but the job was so different then, and I think it was so much more doable because really, I think you just had to be a good strategist, and you depended on your agency for creative. The expectations of you and everyone around you for creative was reasonable. And so if you had a good agency and a good enduring relationship with that agency, you remember these meetings, Mike, you sit down, you get your three concepts presented to you. You're like, you give a couple of unhelpful comments, and you pick one of them and you say, hey, why don't we all retire to a steak dinner? I'm buying the martinis. And
I do not remember these meetings. I do not remember these meetings, but go on with your point.
Yeah. Martinis, strawberry cheesecake, medium rare steak. That's what the job was about, right? But I'm obviously, being facetious here. I mean, it was still a hard job. You still had to set the strategy for the company and in the proposition in the market. You had to figure out how we're going to differentiate ourselves and how we're going to sustain that differentiation. That's really hard. But now, ladled on top of that, you're supposed to have the creativity of Lady Gaga, and you're supposed to have the analytical prowess of a Steve Levitt or a Nate Silver. That's how the job has changed, right? Like there's a much higher expectation, I think, that the CMO themselves are going to be this fountain of creativity, that they'll have a whole fleet of agencies that are going to bring in the craziest, most wonderful ideas imaginable. And that all might be doable, but now you've ladled on top of that this quantitative part that you're going to be able to understand this multivariate regression that determines the marginal sensitivity of this advertising to an additional dollar of spend. Most marketers fake at least one of those, maybe two of those three core responsibilities now. Not because there's anything wrong with them, but just because that's the way human beings are wired. We don't have many people on this planet who are both extremely quantitatively gifted and creatively gifted and strategic. It's just an extraordinarily rare combination of qualities. And I can't think of another C-suite position that has anywhere near that kind of range. I guess you could say the CEO has to have tremendous range, but on the rest of the functional positions, I can't think of anyone who comes close to requiring that kind of range. And that's so you've got these insanely high expectations that are very difficult to meet in this new world where information is very transparent and brands aren't as powerful as they used to be and advertising isn't as strong as it used to be. And then you've got this job that's changed to require this breadth, this range that so few people are ever going to have.
So
that's why the last 24 months.
There you go. So I'm in this role now. Say you're a CMO in this role now. What should you be doing to do your best, given what you've said is a mountain that you have to climb as, the CMO? Give our listeners some advice.
Well, I think I would start with this recognition that there are these three dimensions to the job now: the strategy, the creative, and the analytics. And admitting to yourself, you probably don't have the range to cover all three. So figuring out where you're light and hiring the best possible team on those fronts to make sure that you're not only objectively good in those spaces, but you're relatively immune to criticism that you're weak, right? So we talked about this in the last episode. I'd always hire the strongest analytical team I could afford, even though I'm pretty good at the analytics. I'm not so good at the other parts, but I'm pretty good at the analytics. But you still need kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval. You need that kind of third-party validation for the rest of the C-suite to believe you that on the performance side of things, you're doing a halfway decent job. So, and that's just good general management advice, of course, and making sure you have a strong team, but you're solving for three very distinct problems there. Have I got the strategy? Have I got the creative? Have I got, the performance analysis?
So there's also, so that's actually managing the work. There's another, then there's managing the expectations. So I'm interviewing for a CMO job. I can see all the 3 points you laid out. I can also see like the General Motors example or some other examples we could go into where I know the product or the service has an issue. How do I set the expectations correctly on my way in when I'm interviewing for the job and then when I take it?
I'm a little skeptical that you can, honestly, Mike. I think instead I would frame it as, how do you figure out if you've got a chance to win in this particular job that's being offered to you? And I would qualify that, or I would assess that in the following way. I would say, first of all, is the CMO or is the CEO picking me?
Yeah.
Which, if I'm being recruited, they are. If they are, then they're going to have confidence in me, right? So if they've chosen me, that we're going to get off to a good start. And then secondly, how secure is the CEO's position? Does the CEO have the confidence of the board? Does the CEO have a long runway in this position, provided they don't get poached? Or are they flailing? And this CMO position is their cure for that.
In which case you're probably going to be here. Yes. In which case you're going to be probably.
Yeah. Who's going to get sacrificed at the altar there, right? It's going to be you, the CMO. So if the board's putting a lot of pressure on the CEO, the business is flailing, nobody knows where to take this brand. Oh, I know, I'll hire Mike Linton and he'll solve it. That's the kind of setup I think too many CMOs fall for and end up getting, their ticket punched to a short 15 months later.
I do think there's two things I'd add to that on the way in in the interviewing process is make sure you keep all your decision rights clear, that you're gonna be in charge of this, because especially if you're coming into a hot situation, if you don't have the decision rights, that's super tough. And two, in the interview process, I always try and set a timeline for when you might see results. Because the expectation sometimes is that you're going to see results almost immediately, and you're rarely going to get that, and you're never going to get that strategically immediately. So I think that is super important.
Yeah. Similar to that, Mike, I once had I came into a role and pretty quickly figured out that the CEO wanted me to fire the agency. He didn't like the agency. And I didn't want to. Yeah. Because I've
never fired an agency when I've come in ever. No. I think it's a super wrong signal.
Yeah. The reason why not to, Mike, I'm sure you're thinking the same way, is it feeds the myth. It feeds the myth that if we just had better advertising, this would all be taken care of.
Well, one, it feeds the myth, and two, it's going to take a year to get it out.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take longer to work. So you're actually, not only are you feeding the myth, but you're setting yourself up to be crushed, I think. So I've never done that. Okay, sorry, back to your story. How'd you manage that?
Well, I actually talked the CEO out of it eventually. And I think, I'm trying to recall this, I think I used the argument you just used, Mike, which is, listen, an RFP is going to take X many months, and then we're going to bring on a new agency, and then they're going to take 3 to 6 months to come up to speed, and then there's another 3 months for creative. We're looking at 9 to 12 months before anything new is in the market. Why don't I try to make this relationship work? I think I can get better work out of them through a clearer strategic direction. And so that I did eventually convince him to hold off, and we as long as I was there, we kept that agency.
Nice. So you've talked a lot about boards and CEOs. Any other examples or advice you'd want to share with our listeners on this? Free question.
Yeah. I think you have to be very wary of the love affair that CEOs and boards sometimes have with the latest digital tactics. I was at a board meeting once making my presentation, and this was way back in this is when Trump was first elected, so it was late 2015, early 2016, and I'm talking about what we're doing in marketing, and the chairman interrupts me and says, you know who you should talk to? You should talk to Trump's communications director, because I saw this episode on 60 Minutes, and they convinced me that it was his digital marketing that won him that election. And I said, well, okay, that's interesting. I'm always willing to listen to new ideas, so let me go check that 60 Minutes episode out. And so I was able to pull it up, and here's Leslie Stahl interviewing this guy. Her eyes are wide open, her mouth is agape, because he's telling her, listen, I can through Facebook, I can target people with specific demographics. Like if I want to talk to men in C&D counties, I can do it. And get this, Mike, this is the really mind-blowing part. I can show two different people two sets of creative.
Which has been going on forever. So,
and then through A/B testing, I can pick the red one instead of the blue one, because the red one does better with audiences than the blue one. And my board, just like Leslie Stahl, was completely mind blown over this. And I tried to patiently explain to him that we've been doing this for years. The whole commercial marketplace.
Yeah, the whole world was doing it for years.
But they
made it to politics. It finally made it to politics, and then it's news.
Then they think they invented it. Yeah. No, it's so funny. So I actually had to waste hours of my time contacting the communications director for Donald Trump and talking to him and pretending like he could teach me something about how to market things. So how do you fight that? I'm not entirely sure, but I think you fight it by just showing extreme awareness of and familiarity with the latest tactics, even if you're not using them.
No, I do think there is here's the things we are looking at already, and here's the things we are studying that I almost always try and bring into a board. So they know, they don't act like, oh my God, this whole thing is so brand new.
Yeah.
You can actually, do it. And you've been doing it for years. And that's an art, because if you let them too far in, they're going to manage it for you. You just have to give them enough that they know you're doing it, and then they may back off. But if you let them in the hen house on this one, they're going to kill a lot of chickens.
No, I think you're right, Mike. From that point on, I would always do a little bit of show and tell at the board meeting. Just bring some little tidbit of whiz bang kind of stuff. That seemed to work. But you're right. Yeah, it's a tightrope for sure.
Well, I think the other thing for me, and we can talk about this kind of next on the expectations thing, is marketing is always at the center where the consumer, technology, and the company meet. And it's almost impossible for the company to see all of it at once. And your ability to actually show that to the board and your other members of the lead team, I think helps them understand you're working on it or you're thinking about it, but you have to do it in a way it doesn't take a lot of time.
Yeah.
But you're always at the front of the technology and the consumer and the company. And when everybody in the company catches up to all that technology, they want to know what you're doing. Managing them is super, super important. And I like how you did it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Mike, you always used to tell us, back in our Best Buy days, that the marketing position is so tough because everybody has a point of view about your work. Nobody's telling the supply chain guy that he should run more trucks between Boston and Cleveland, but they're quite happy to tell you that Super Bowl that was terrible.
Yes.
And so I think the job is, this is probably the other structural challenge of the job that I didn't write about, Mike, is that I think in that way probably innately more political, and I mean political in a good sense, not a politics sense, but in a sense that you have to manage so many relationships and build so much trust and constantly maintain it with all your potential critics, or you're going to be in a lot of trouble. And is that true for all C-level positions? Yes, sure, it is to some extent. But it seems like for the marketer, it's even more important because your work is so visible, and it's so easy for people to believe that they know how to make it better.
Well, two things I would say. It's the most public of the functions by far. And two, your most passionate consumers are not in the marketplace. They're usually in your company. And if you're not managing the strategy and those consumers in your company, they are going to give you the strategy and then they're going to fire you for it when it doesn't work. And so you have to, I think, work to stay out in front of the company on all those fronts, or you'll get in trouble. And I guess per your article, you'll get extinct. And because everybody kind of wants to manage marketing. And that's what makes it such a fun job, but also that's what makes it such a hard job. And that's why you're comparing it to houseflies. Still hurts right here, Jeff. Houseflies. Anything you'd like to share with our listeners as we get to the end of the show? Any practical advice you want to put on the table for everybody?
I don't know if I have much new ground, Mike, to be honest. I think we've covered nearly all of it. You have to make sure that you've got a very strong relationship with the CEO. You have to have the confidence of the board. You have to at least be aware of and conversant in, if not fluent in, the latest tactics. You have to know the analytics as well as anybody, and you have to have sort of that good housekeeping seal of approval from someone who is not you, that says on the performance side you're doing the right things. And even all that may not be enough, but I think if you cover those things, you give yourself a good fighting chance.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I agree. I think it's like being a manager of a major league sports team, which is everyone sees everything you do and everyone has an opinion. So thank you, Jeff. And thanks to our listeners for listening to CMO Confidential. Look for any of our other shows, including Why the Short Shelf Life of CMOs, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. What your agency really wants to tell you, but won't. What it's like to be in a fast growth B2B startup. And Jeff's earlier show is Marketing's Obsession with Measurement Destroying the Function. Thanks again, Jeff. And all you marketers, stay safe out there. This is Mike Linton signing off at CMO Confidential.
Today's episode of CMO Confidential is brought to you by CMOcoaches.com. Are you a current or aspiring chief marketing officer looking to take your career to the next level? You should work with a CMO coach. CMO coaches are former CMOs who are nationally certified coaches. So whether you want to improve your leadership skills, develop your team, or drive better business results, we have the experience and expertise to help you succeed. To learn more, visit us at CMOcoaches.com.
Are you tired of the same old productivity hacks? Have you read the top 20 books on effectiveness, and yet your workdays and email inbox still causing anxiety, burnout, and even depression? Ready to learn the latest in brain-based modalities, techniques, and technologies to optimize your success and well-being? Welcome to the Focus to Evolve podcast, where we'll illuminate your path to spacious productivity and balanced thriving. Each week, we dive into deeply insightful and immediately impactful methods to help you become highly effective while promoting health, profitability, and well-being. Say goodbye to the trance of busyness and hello to your highest potential. It's time to discover a new way of accelerating your mission, growth, and purpose. Join us on the Focus to Evolve podcast and get ready to live your most joyful, productive, and fulfilling life.
Hi, my name is Sarah, and I want to tell you about my podcast called Can I offer you some feedback? I'm a business consultant and executive coach with over 20 years experience in change management, leadership development, and naturally providing feedback to high performers. My podcast is for those of you who have a complicated relationship with feedback, whether giving, receiving, avoiding, or seeking. Feedback is essential for our development. In each episode, you'll hear from real people across industries with their ideas, perspectives, and best practices on feedback. I'll also be sharing business bites with you, simple explanations of organizational tools, management techniques, and leadership philosophies that will help you and your businesses thrive. You can listen to Can I Offer You Some Feedback on your favorite podcast app or learn more at evergreenpodcasts.com.